Melissa Lagowski, thank you for being with me today on the Courage of a Leader podcast.
Thank you so much, Amy, for the opportunity. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, I'm excited for the conversation that we're going to have. Melissa, I know that you believe that everyone in an organization is a leader and has a voice and can stand up for themselves or for what they believe in. How did you come to this belief?
I think I've always just naturally been a leader. And so it came kind of easily for me. But I remember it was during the pandemic, and there was a moment in time where I saw posted in a Facebook group that I was part of that there had just been an awful incident in line at a Starbucks where a child had actually been called out in a racist way. And the mother was very upset, didn't exactly know what to do with that. And it made me start to think, right? Like, we have to make little changes along the way. Like, if all of us are actually really showing up in our day to day to defend what we love, to protect who we love, to be able to, you know, share what our thoughts are, that it really matters. And so I thought about it kind of within our company that I want every member of my team to always feel like they have a voice, that they have the ability to ask questions, they have the ability to bring their thoughts and ideas, because when we share, right, it also elevates everything. It elevates the experience for our clients, it elevates for our employees, it elevates for, the whole company. And so I think some people think, oh, I'm not a leader, and they want to kind of shirk into the shadows.
Mhm.
But whether you're in line at a grocery store or, right, I think about even how time over these last 5 years seem to have really advanced a lot in the awareness space. And so I think sometimes, right, I used to laugh at jokes that maybe really weren't that funny in my mind, but because we would just laugh, right? Those things continue. And so the ability for us to just say, like, I'm sorry, but I don't think that's funny, that starts to impact how the teller receives it. And even if you don't change their mind, the hope, right, that you make them think a little bit more before maybe they say something that, did it really need to be said?
Yes, all of these, you say little opportunities, but they can have big impact and certainly over time to raise awareness, to
Yes.
give exposure to another perspective, right? To get that feedback. I said something in a Starbucks line and somebody had a reaction I didn't maybe expect to that. Hmm, that's some feedback for
Yeah.
me. Right? And we talk so much about the importance of having diversity, yet if we are not pulling out and allowing for, because sometimes we don't know to prompt the question. Someone's having a thought over there, we don't see it, it's invisible to us, but we've created that environment where that person can speak up
Yes.
and say
Yes.
something.
Yes, I love it too. Like, my daughter has organically just really applied that. And I think it's a beautiful thing. She's now a senior in high school, and every single parent teacher conference we have, your daughter really knows how to advocate for herself. And I'm like, what a beautiful thing, right? Because it took me a lot of years to figure it out. And it feels good to finally be there and to encourage others to step into that space.
Great. What a compliment for your daughter and what you've generated and encouraged inside of her. So let's talk about that. How do we advocate? Because Melissa, I think some would say, I'm not able to do that. I mean, I have to do what my boss says. I can't question my senior leaders or bring up something contrary to their point of view. How do we do that? How do we advocate? Because if a senior in high school can do it, how can we all
Yes.
do it?
Right? I think that sometimes we automatically think we have to be very direct. And I think that when we are super direct, we can feel very abrasive. It can feel incredibly uncomfortable. And so I really have been on this path lately of lead with curiosity. And when you can ask questions, you can foster and invite different conversations, right? Instead of just saying, you know, you shouldn't do that way. Why do we do this way? How was this process established? When is the last time we reevaluated if, this is the best way to be approaching something? And so it starts to open up, right? It doesn't feel like an attack on the person you're talking to. And it starts to be a softer intro to kind of tiptoe into the conversation. And I think for a lot of people, a lot of people are very timid and don't want direct confrontation. And so that stops people from realizing how to lean into their voice. And so when you can do it in a way that seems more curious and you can just find those questions, I feel like you start to tiptoe into the conversation to also see how deep is the water, right? How far out can I go on this before you get in over your head and feel like you can't, you're drowning. So I think this concept of just really being able to think intentionally about how to do it. I also think timing is really important. Um, we do some really big projects, and we get to a moment in time where it is just all systems go. There is no opportunity to challenge, to question.
Uh-huh,
We like to be making notes for next time how we're going to do it better,
uh-huh,
but that is not the moment. Like when all hands are on deck and it's a four-alarm fire, right? To like,
uh-huh.
can we just talk about this process? Like, that's the wrong time. So to really pay attention to when the right time is, to really like be able to have somebody's full attention, I think those things start to set you up for, more success. Um, there's more research around this too, and you can always look up more best practices. So you can go in feeling prepared. Sometimes, right, you can even write out or think about questions that maybe the other person might ask.
Yeah.
Or if you were on the flip side, I love right now, I don't mean to keep talking about my children, but my son is currently in mock trial. And one of the things that I love the most about what they do is that they have to represent both sides.
Oh,
And
yes.
so, right, I think when you talk about how do you do this successfully, sometimes it is imagining ourselves in their shoes. I grew up in a fixed mindset world, but I'm a growth mindset person. And
Yeah.
so to really be able to think about where does somebody come from? What has formed their thoughts and their opinions? It starts to make for a better conversation. You won't always receive that. You can try to lead that
Uh-huh.
way and you can try to be able to go down that road, but you have to know sometimes people don't know how to do it. And it's not you or them, it can just be how they've experienced their life.
Yeah, yeah, but we want to demonstrate what we want to get in return. And if we demonstrate it, then we exponentially improve our chances of having that open, curious, learning conversation. Melissa,
And then you start to show other people, again, too, what does an alternative look like? It's much like what you just said before on the first question, right? They can be like, oh, I never thought of approaching something this way. Or how did I even change my mind? Because that was a great conversation we just had. And so I think it also in a professional setting, I think it can really start to advance people in their career paths.
terrific. I want to underscore the other two strategies that you shared with us, Melissa, as well. The lead with curiosity. Get curious. And then when you were sharing examples of different questions that we could ask, I noticed they were all open-ended and that tone mattered. The way that you said them to me was a very curious tone. Right? So we do need to take that pause, take that breath so that we can come at it with curiosity. And then the timing is important,
Yeah.
right? Like in the middle of the most urgent part of the project might not be the moment to share. Could we have process checks along the way about how we're doing? But and definitely post project, that
Oh,
acknowledgement of what worked, what didn't work, what ideas do we have? So, as team members, we can prompt for those kinds of conversations. As leaders, we can bake those into the process.
it's funny that you say that too, Amy, because we naturally, after large projects, we always do a debrief. I didn't even think twice, right? That some people might not because it's so much a part of our fabric. But to your point, when you start to just talk about what went well, what could go better, right? We don't
Yeah.
have to negatively label it, but where could we make improvements? And those discussions where you're acknowledging both things just help you continue to elevate.
Yeah. Well, and then you hear each other's perspectives on that. Oh, that really, really worked for them. Okay,
Yes.
I'll be sure to do it that way again. It might have just been something I tried one time and maybe wasn't going to make it a permanent part of my approach. Well, now I know it really worked for you. So I'm going to make sure to do that again. Or,
Right?
oh,
It can be valuable as a manager, right? Trying to work with your team as a higher up, trying to kind of be able to draw more out of your team. Yeah, all the way around. Value comes.
yes. Okay, I have more questions, Melissa, but I'm going to pause and tell the listeners more about you. Melissa Lagowski created Big Buzz Idea Group in November of 2004 as a boutique agency to provide management, marketing, and event services to nonprofits and associations. Melissa is dedicated to providing full operational support or a la carte services that will allow charitable organizations to run more effectively. With 34 years of corporate and nonprofit experience, Melissa has consulted national organizations, managed local chapters, provided virtual office assistance to numerous NPOs, launched and executed large fundraisers, conceived innovative and lucrative new programming, coordinated client conferences, workshops, dinners, and awards functions. Amongst other rewards and accomplishments, Melissa has achieved Enterprising Woman of the Year by Enterprising Women magazine in 2014, NABO Chicago Presidential Award of Excellence in 2014, Woman of Influence by the Chicago Business Journal, 2016, NABO Chicago Member of the Year Award, 2023, and CO 100 America's Top 100 Small Businesses in 2024. Glad to have you and all of your expertise with us, Melissa.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I want to ask you about processing in the moment. Because Melissa, sometimes, I'm speaking personally, sometimes something comes up and I process it and it's like, yes, I do want to say something. And I'm able to ask a question or share a point of view in that moment. And sometimes I'm not. Sometimes something falls down in that, right? Either I can't process quick enough in that moment, right? Or it does come out too direct or not direct enough, right? I really don't grab someone's attention in that moment. What advice do you have when something unexpected comes our way and oh, I do want to voice something in this moment?
I think first we have to remember it's okay to take a breath. I feel like silence can seem like an eternity, but when we just pause to reflect for a moment, it can be so powerful, both for us and for whoever we're speaking with or what have you. So I think that first of all, knowing we don't have to be so direct and just knowing inside, right? Like to your point, the tone is really important. So if all of a sudden you find yourself, right, like kind of rising in a tone that might not be conducive, if you can be very aware of that, to take that pause, especially in moments like that, it's going to be more important. I think second, we can kind of practice. It's a muscle. We're not going to be good. I forget who said it, but when I heard it, I loved it. And the first few times you do something, you're going to suck. You're just going to suck. And
Yeah.
that's okay because you are gaining practice to get better. And so the value of being able think about things sometimes in advance, right? Like what might questions be? Because I feel like if you kind of have them in your toolbox, and you heard me
Mm.
say, like, have we thought? Could we try? Like, if you think about simple intro phrases that might lead that conversation, your mind can pull on those when needed. And I think the other thing that I really think is okay too, right? Sometimes we shouldn't address something in the moment. Sometimes it can be far too charged. We can hear somebody else's energy and we can get a sense of, again, right, is the timing right? How
Mm-hmm.
strong are they in their convictions? Is it the right time to test that, challenge that question that you could really embarrass people if you ask about something in a big setting? So sometimes one-on-one could be good. But I
Mm-hmm.
think that it's okay too that you don't have to have every conversation immediately. I
Mm-hmm.
think in our daily lives and in the places where we spend a lot of time, we can ask for a follow-up conversation once we've had a time to reflect. I used to be one of those people. I would always think of all the things that I really was feeling after I left the room, and I didn't know what to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think in that moment, to be able to then say, hey, I was thinking more about that. Could we have a follow-up conversation? Could we just have a 10-minute check-in or whatever the case might be?
Yes.
And then you can do it directly. You can do it in a private setting. You can do it once you had a time to really reflect and prepare so you'll feel better. And hopefully any charge that might have been in the moment will have dissipated.
Love it. I want to repeat all of those, Melissa. So first of all, take a breath. And I like the way that you say that, the breath, because that can be a psychological threat moment. And of course, our brains treat psychological threats like physical threats. So it goes into amygdala hijack, fight, flight, or
Yes.
freeze mode. And that's not what we need if we're trying to think, what do I want to say in this moment? So when we take that breath, it tells our brain the human's not running from a tiger. So you can get out of the amygdala hijack and you can let that brain activity go to the prefrontal cortex. Love that you said silence is okay. Let the silence sit, right? And if you do decide to say something in that moment, you can say, I've been thinking about this. You could even admit, I'm not sure I'm going to say this in the best way, but I
Yes.
want to have a conversation here. Something's coming up for me, right? So that silence is okay. The practice, right? Practice. Sometimes it's practicing in retro, right? What I wish I would have said in the line at the Starbucks.
It prepares you for the next time, right?
Then you can get your on ramps to the curious questions and get those prepared. Get some open ended questions at the ready. And know that if it's a long term relationship, like you might not be able to come back to it later if it was the person in the Starbucks line, right? But if it's
Right.
your team member, if it's your colleague, there's always an opportunity to come back to it later. And maybe
Yeah.
that's the best if you can have a moment to think through your messaging and your perspective and do what you said earlier, Melissa, practice like what is their point of view?
Yeah. I like what you also said too, right? Like sometimes when you do intro into those, I think saying, I've got more questions or something's coming up for me. Because again, right, that doesn't seem attacking. That doesn't seem direct. That doesn't seem challenging. That seems like I am sitting with something that I'd like to reconcile. And people often want to help other people. I mean, good people want to help other people generally. And so that starts to like be a safer space.
Yes, yes. I'm pondering something that's not sitting well with me rather than you said something that's super triggering me right now.
Yes.
Why is it important for all of us to have and use our voice, no matter what position, no matter how new we are to a team? Why is that important?
I think there are so many important reasons to be a leader in the circles you touch. Again, I think I was super motivated to lean more into that during a time when I realized that there had been some long-term biases in our society that unintentional. But if we're not intentional, things don't change. That was such an eye-opening moment for me. And so I think, right, a lot of people want to advance and they don't know how. And so if you squash that voice, if people don't know you're there, if you're not having the hard conversations, then you could get passed up. You could be the smartest person in the room and you won't get the opportunity to let your light shine to its fullest potential. And I think the more that people can understand themselves and be aware, then again, right, I just think the more in alignment you are. And when you know your values, when you can protect those values, it helps you find the people that you align the best with too. We primarily work with nonprofit organizations, and what we really find is that the best boards are when people come in focused on the mission and the vision. They have a shared goal of what they're trying to accomplish, and they're willing to have difficult conversations, not by attacking one another, which is like how I grew up. And right, it was a blame game. It always felt awful. But instead, when you can just say, like, oh, I don't understand what you're seeing. Can you tell me about that? Oh, yeah, I want to understand your idea more too. Oh, what if we took a little bit of this and a little bit of that? And then I think this would bring us to a better solution. So I think we are in a point in time where the more we can have these openly candid conversations and bring candor to the conversations, I think they're more real. I think they accomplish more, they move the needle. And I think the benefit, I mean, it can be to your company, to your family, to yourself, whatever that might look like. But I think it allows you to feel more fulfilled. And I think it continues to let us all build up our self-confidence, which I just think really helps us all shine brighter.
And new leaders, emerging leaders, or new team members, like build that self-confidence now, right? Don't start sharing your voice like once you get to mid-level management or a certain
Yeah.
number of years in your career. Let your light, let your strengths, let yourself shine now. And I love this is the way that we are going to break down long-term bias. And I want to add on to what you're saying about let your thoughts, let your ideas out there, make your mark. Melissa, I talk to leaders all the time who are asking me, how do I get my team members to be more proactive, to take ownership, to use their critical thinking, right? There's too much just in execution mode, and I'm doing what I'm asked and not thinking any more or different about it. So I'm here to say, individual contributors, new team members, like your leaders are here for it. They want to know that you care and you're thinking about the results and how to best get there. Yeah. And this is how we accomplish the mission,
Yeah.
talking through all the ideas and the perspectives because challenges, opportunities, they're complex right now. And we need all of that healthy debate to work out the best possible solutions.
Yeah, debate's not a bad word, right? Like debate is really thinking things through more thoroughly. And I think if we reframe it, it starts to feel a lot better. And I think we as leaders in positions of authority need to make sure we're making time for those conversations to help our team understand how important they are and that we're serious about it. Because you can say it, but if you don't make time to help them feel like psychologically safe, if they don't feel that they can be vulnerable, or if they feel that they're going to be ostracized or cast away if they share their voice, you're not gonna get the full benefit of sharing that you could.
Yes, yes. Leaders can encourage this and create the environment where it feels safe, both in one-on-ones. I often talk with leaders about, tell me two things that are working about the project and two things that are not, right?
Huh,
Prompt for both sides of the coin. And then in
yeah,
meetings, all right, who has a different perspective?
yeah,
Maybe even assign roles. Like, Melissa, I want you to play devil's advocate today.
yes, right. That's a great idea. I love that one.
Melissa, if someone feels like they haven't been practicing knowing and sharing their voice, what would you recommend for them to get started, to firmly plant themselves on this journey?
I would consider starting with journaling. I think a little bit of writing and getting your thoughts on paper. If you can reflect on times when maybe you wish you had, I think we all have some of those in the closet, if you will.
Mhm.
And so really just being able to start practicing that, to think about it. And sometimes, right, like the role playing that you mentioned, I think can be huge. So whether that might be with a colleague, a teammate, your partner, a friend, there's a lot of places where we can really practice it before maybe we unleash it, if you will. And I think that that can help that dialogue. And I think the other thing too that I would really say for people who want to be a better leader, I think that sometimes it's important for the juniors or the middle managers with the C-suite, like start showing an interest in them. Like it doesn't have to go from the top down. I think that it needs to also come from the bottom up and in a thoughtful, respectful way, right? Even asking a leader above you, how did you get started? What
Yeah,
are your aspirations?
yeah.
Like if you show a genuine interest, you start to forge that stronger relationship where lovely conversations can evolve from there.
Ah, terrific advice. Journal. I love that because that is active, constructive reflection. Right. I'm imagining journaling about it and getting like those starts to those curious questions, like finding out like, okay, the time that I was too aggressive in the moment. What was the trigger? Why did that happen?
Yeah.
I wasn't able to formulate a response when I wanted to. What was going on for me there? Processing all of that. And then I love this, just get curious, form a relationship with those above us, around us. How did you get started? What excites you about this project? What concerns you about this project? What keeps you up at night? I
Even to your point with your teammates, I mean, that can just help your team be more cohesive and effective. And the more you know how one another works. I had a teammate this week who just gave me an insight into how they work. And
love.
in doing that, like I now can have a better relationship and we can communicate in a stronger way, which I love.
Thank you, Melissa, for all of the great practical advice about how to do this, right? We can talk in theory about having a voice and sharing your voice. You gave us some great practical ideas for doing so. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for the opportunity, Amy.